All right, and welcome back for those of you that were in the first session, and welcome to those of you that are joining us for the first time today. We will give everyone just a second to transition out of the waiting room before we get started. Just want to remind you that this is a CE presentation, and if you are looking to earn CEs, you will need to watch the entirety of this talk live. You will not be able to earn credit if you go back and watch it in the recording. But that leads me to my next point. This will be recorded, so you will be able to go back and navigate the recordings for not just this session, but all of our sessions through your CEO dashboard. Before I introduce my wonderful colleagues and my friends, I want to encourage you to utilize the chat. Please put your questions, comments in there. We value your participation and your feedback. I will also be sharing my contact information and other information related to CEO should you have any questions regarding technical issues or just logistics regarding the Within Summit. So without further ado, I'm going to take a moment to introduce my colleagues and friends. I'm going to start with Chrissy Stockert. Chrissy is the Chief Health Officer at Within and is coming to you from sunny and warm Miami, Florida. Chrissy's journey in healthcare started after a career as a teacher, and she still loves to bring education into the work she does every day. After becoming a nurse in 2010 and working in various specialties, she found her passion and has dedicated the past 12 years to specializing in the field of eating disorders. She feels honored every day to work in this field and with this population, guiding individuals toward recovery in both her mission and privilege. Beyond her professional endeavors, she is a proud mother of two wonderful children. She loves to go to their school plays and cheer at their soccer games. When she's not chasing around her little ones, you can probably find her baking, reading, walking, or yes, this is Chrissy's own words. I'm not calling her a nerd. She says that she's a nerd at heart doing a crossword puzzle. And because Chrissy is my friend, I'm gonna say, and she knows how to grow pineapples. Okay, I just thought I'd throw that fun fact in there for her. And my next person I'm going to introduce is the lovely Mary Dye. Mary Dye is one of our wonderful advisors here at Within Health and the director at Prosperity Norfolk. Mary is a certified eating disorder specialist and approved consultant through the International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals. She brings over 20 years of experience in the field of eating disorders and is grounded in the principles of intuitive eating and weight inclusive care. Living up and down the East Coast, she has treated clients across all levels of care and has held leadership roles at multiple eating disorder treatment facilities. She maintains a private practice centered on professional supervision and consultation. Currently, Mary serves as an expert advisor for Within Health and is the director of nutrition from Prosperity Eating Disorders and Wellness in her hometown of Norfolk, Virginia. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to my friends and colleagues, Mary and Chrissy.
All right, so I will go ahead and share my screen. There we go. All right, well, welcome everyone. We are really excited to be here. And this morning we are going to talk about something that, well, 50% of the population will go through at some point. We're going to be talking about perimenopause and menopause and the connection between that and eating disorders. So we will jump right in.
Yeah.
All right, so our objectives for today, we are going to explain the basic science of what's occurring in the body of an individual with ovaries during perimenopause. We're going to be able to identify at least 5 of the signs and symptoms of perimenopause and why they occur, and explain the dietary and physical needs of an individual in perimenopause and how that can influence eating disorder recovery. So I always like to start with why do we have to care? So we have to care because our clients are hearing a lot of messaging about perimenopause and menopause, and those messages are very confusing. Because our clients are being ignored by a lot of providers who minimize the symptoms that they're experiencing. And if we were to put all of it together, here is something that someone may hear on any given day. Eat your weight in protein daily, at least 30 grams of protein in every meal and more in snacks. And why not just add in a bunch of protein powder as well? Because no one would be able to eat enough protein to do what we're telling you. But make sure that the majority of what you get is from real food and not supplements. And it can't be too much at once because then your body can't process all of it. And make sure you have variety in what you eat, but don't eat carbohydrates because they'll kill you. But make sure you're also eating your weight in fiber or you'll never poop again and your sugar will go out of control. Also, make sure you aren't eating too many calories, but make sure you have a lot of fat in your diet and make sure that it's good fat and not bad fat because good fat will make you good and bad fat will kill you tomorrow. And make sure you're eating lots of meals throughout the day, but also don't graze because then you'll gain weight and no one wants that. And while you're spending your day thinking about what you have eaten or will eat, make sure you're also not obsessing about food because it's really about movement. So make sure you're heavy lifting 4 to 5 times a week. You should do weight bearing activity and walk with a weighted vest and be able to carry your body weight around a gym a few times. And don't forget to jump. But also don't do too much or your cortisol levels will go up and that isn't good for you. So make sure that you're meditating daily for stress reduction and doing gentle yoga at least 5 times a week. While you're at it, make sure you're sprinting for heart health, but don't do too much cardio because it's all about weightlifting now. But you have to get your heart rate up or your heart will fail you too early in life. You're at increased risk now, because you're in perimenopause and it will all go downhill from here. Oh, and by the way, make sure you're still putting in 100% while you have brain fog and haven't been sleeping well. And make sure you're taking care of your children and your aging parents. And above all else, don't forget to have constant gratitude. So, we are getting a lot of these messages. Our patients are getting these messages. And one of the things that then happens is perimenopause opens what we call a window of vulnerability into disordered eating and eating disorders. And this can be from patients who may have had a history of disordered eating or an eating disorder, and patients with no history of it. And so we want to be careful and know what people are hearing so that we know how to respond to that when they come to us with those messages.
Yeah, so if we take it on to this next bit with our vulnerability, and that's a real term, perimenopausal vulnerability. And I don't know if anyone out there listening, if that resonated when Chrissy first went through that with me. I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, that's every time I look at anything. That is life right now, is these just really unattainable expectations, recommendations. I don't know. So perimenopausal vulnerability is really just that. It's looking at this certain, span of life phase and saying, gosh, there's actually data and there a lot more is needed. You see the dates of these studies. We need a lot more data out there. But I think anecdotally, a lot of us probably see it as well. That with the changes that are happening in this time, that can be considered kind of like that off ramp from those fertile years, it really sets us up from moving away from a lot of the societal kind of ideals and so forth. And a lot of these pressures are being put on, and it really sets us up as women, to be really, really vulnerable to disordered eating and eating disorders. And what the data is showing us is even women that have never had disordered eating or eating disorders in their history are reporting thoughts and symptoms and are starting to report, exacerbated body dissatisfaction, lowering self-esteem, fixation on the body, as all of these changes are taking place. So, we wanted to look a little bit deeper in this because I think that many of us are treating this population and having people come in, with this perimenopausal vulnerability and really acknowledge on what's going on in this population. So much is happening, these changes. We want to also dive into what's actually happening in the body at this time. That's going to also contribute to that higher risk in these years.
So, to give you all anatomy, physiology, biology, a little lesson in what's actually happening in our body, it all goes back to the eggs. So an average individual born with ovaries has approximately 600,000 oocytes at birth. So oocytes, just a fancy term for the eggs that we're going to ovulate. which is 2,000 times more than will ever be ovulated, because the average individual will ovulate somewhere between 300 and 400 times throughout their life. So that oocyte number starts to decrease immediately at birth. And by the time we actually go through puberty, that number will have cut in half to about 300,000 or 150,000 eggs in each ovary by that onset of puberty. During each cycle, a lot of eggs will start to fight. They want to become what is called that dominant follicle. And so all these little oocytes are going to start to try to mature. One is only going to win though. And so that one egg will end up being released during ovulation. And those other more or less 1,000 that were fighting to become that dominant follicle are going to die. So every cycle, we're losing about 1,000 eggs, which is where that 300,000 to 300 ovulations becomes, that number is going to dwindle. So as that number of available follicles is another word for the egg that actually gets developed, that menopause transition is actually going to start. And so here is what the typical reproductive cycle is going to look like in someone with ovaries. So we have in our brain our hypothalamus, and here I'm circling it right here. We have our hypothalamus that releases something called gonadotropin releasing hormone, which tells our pituitary gland, which is also right next to the hypothalamus in the brain, to release hormones. Predominantly, the pituitary is going to release two different hormones. One is called LH and one is called FSH. LH is luteinizing hormone, FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. Those hormones are going to travel down to the ovaries, where they're going to tell the ovaries to develop and release that egg. And as that happens, you're going to see dramatic rises in estrogen and progesterone. Which that rise is then going to send a message back up into that hypothalamus to tell it to stop releasing that gonadotropin releasing hormone until someone menstruates. Those estrogen and progesterone levels are going to drop. The gonadotropin releasing hormone is going to start again. And we end up in this cycle that is very, very predictable for most people, unless you have other underlying conditions. But that most of us can predict for probably 20 to 25 years, this is what my body's cycle looks like. And if we were to look at it in a graph, this is what all of those different parts of our body are doing at the same time. So here we have our little follicle, it's growing, we ovulate, we develop what's called a corpus luteum, which is the end result of that ovulation. This is what also produces progesterone. And if no implantation and fertilization occurs, it's going to eventually dwindle off. At the same time, we have these hormones from our pituitary gland. So we have the rise and surge in FSH and LH that are going to happen. As ovulation happens, those are going to drop dramatically. And we have our estrogen and progesterone. So estradiol or estrogen is going to actually have two different surges. We have a surge mid-cycle. So for individuals who have had maybe a diagnosis of PMS or PMDD, and they actually notice that they have mood swings twice in their cycle. Typically, it's related to estrogen, and it can happen right before you ovulate and again right before you have your period. And so we have this estrogen increase that happens right before ovulation, and then you see both estrogen and progesterone increase for a little while until no implantation or fertilization occurs. They're going to drop. And as that's happening, here's what's happening with our uterine lining. So we have our period, our uterine lining is very thin. It's going to thicken, thicken, thicken so that it would be a nice, warm, welcoming environment to a fertilized egg. And then if that doesn't occur, as progesterone levels drop, you'll see that the period starts again. And so here's a fun fact to take away with you from this one. One of the things that we often hear our patients say, and if you are an individual with ovaries and a uterus, you may have noticed this also, is that in those 2 to 3 days before we get our period, you may notice that you get really constipated. Well, that is normal. This is supposed to happen because if you notice here, we have progesterone levels rising. Well, one of the main jobs of progesterone is to relax smooth muscle. We want our smooth muscle to be really relaxed so that it is that welcoming environment for an egg. But it doesn't work exclusively on the smooth muscle of our uterus. And what is right next to our uterus? Our large intestines, which are also made out of smooth muscle. So those are also going to be nice and relaxed. And so as that progesterone level rises, we're going to notice that those contractions in our large intestine are going to decrease. We may hold on to stool for a couple of days. And then once you get your period, all of a sudden, if you're like me, you run to the bathroom and you're like, whoop, got to have some diarrhea now. And so off we go and our cycle resets itself. With our patients with eating disorders who may not be as in tune with what's happening in their body physiologically, this can sometimes be really distressing to them. And so it's important to know what's going on with them so that we can also normalize it and they don't need to run and take a laxative. This is normal. It will all reset itself in the next couple of days.
Yeah, I also want to point out there another thing. I know all of you dietitians see this every month. If you are monitoring weight on your clients, is the weight tends to go up in that exact same time frame that Chrissy is describing. And I know we talk about like bloating and water retention, and probably your clients are coming and saying, oh, I feel so, quote unquote, gross, like everything's feeling tighter around my mid area. Yeah, you're probably pretty constipated. So we do want to ask that question as well. And then what do we also see happen is usually a day or two into the cycle, we'll often see weight come back down. It was like a little jump up. And so, yeah, the more we can bring this into conversation, gosh, help them understand their bodies. Thank you, Chrissy.
And then I turned 40. And for some people, maybe 35 is where this happened. And now all of a sudden, my periods are irregular. I'm growing hair where I shouldn't grow hair, but not where I want to. I can't sleep. I'm hot all the time. My joints hurt. My words are getting jumbled. I don't know my own body anymore, and I'm gaining weight. And what's going on? And so one of the things, and Mary just alluded to this, is that a lot of people feel a lot of distress leading up to their period because they might notice appetite changes. They might feel like they're gaining weight. They might feel bloated. And this is actually really normal because this is part of our normal hormone cycle. They've done a lot of studies on it, and it is linked to estrogen and progesterone levels. And so what we know is normal is that when estrogen is high and progesterone is low, appetite is lower. And I can actually go right back here to this slide. So estrogen is high, progesterone is low, our appetite feels lower. When estrogen is high and progesterone is also high, we end up with increased appetite and emotional eating. And what they also know is that progesterone alone does not affect the appetite. So in a normal cycle, we feel lower appetite in this first half of our cycle. Our appetite goes up in this second half, and then it comes back down to normal. In perimenopause, our hormones wreak havoc on our body. And our estrogen and progesterone levels are doing this without our knowledge of it, without our control over it. And so it can actually lead to what they found in certain studies is that when that progesterone is high and increasing estrogen levels are happening, it was strongly associated with binge eating. It was also strongly associated with body dissatisfaction. And so when we're in this perimenopause time and our hormones are really wreaking havoc on our body, it can feel like our eating is out of control. All of our prior patterns that were predictable feel like they're gone, which is why women end up at this increased risk for taking matters into their own hands and for that window of vulnerability to be swung wide open. And so, the perimenopause. Menopause itself is defined as 12 months after your final menstrual period, and that is when the oocyte count is 0. The eggs are gone. The average age of menopause is 51. Anything 45 or later is considered normal. Anything between 40 and 44 is considered early menopause. Anything before the age of 40 is considered primary ovarian insufficiency. And medically induced menopause can occur anytime throughout the life if the ovaries are surgically removed or no longer function due to medication or other interventions. But the symptoms of menopause, perimenopause, can start up to 10 years before someone goes through menopause. So if the average age is 51, by 41, you might be feeling it. And if you are going to go through menopause at 45, that is 35 when you could start to feel those symptoms of perimenopause. And so all of those feelings of there's something going on in my body, they're real. It is not a figment of your imagination, and it is not something that you should allow providers to gaslight you on and tell you this is all normal, your hormones are normal. So what is going on in the body? Different hormones are surging. There is less availability of eggs. There is a decrease in that feedback mechanism where the estrogen and progesterone are not sending that feedback to the hypothalamus and the pituitary. So we can end up seeing cycles where the FSH levels increase, but there is not actually no follicle that develops. You can see rises and falls in estrogen. You can see rises and falls in progesterone. There will often be what they call anovulatory cycles. So you don't actually ovulate. When someone is fully in menopause, they are no longer in that perimenopause transition. What you end up seeing is a very high FSH, and that will remain high because there's nothing inhibiting it. You see estrogen that's low because those follicles are not being created, but estrogen is created in other parts of the body. It is not exclusive to the ovaries. So you'll never see an estrogen level drop to 0, but you will see a significant decrease in estrogen. And then what you see is progesterone levels that crash, and eventually, because progesterone is only created by that corpus luteum, you will see a progesterone level of 0. So once someone is fully in menopause, you can see it in lab work, but prior to that, in that perimenopause transition, you cannot gauge where someone is in that, in the stages of perimenopause just by lab work alone, because very often it will look totally normal. If you look to 20 years ago, the list of perimenopausal symptoms was hot flashes. That was it. Now there are over 25, and the list keeps growing. And fun fact, over 90% of women will go to their healthcare providers for advice on how to cope with menopausal symptoms. And many will go to multiple providers for different things before they are actually diagnosed. So they're going to go to a sleep specialist because they can't sleep. They're going to go to the orthopedic surgeon because all of their joints are hurting. They're going to go to a psychiatrist because their moods are fluctuating wildly. And it takes a very long time often for people to say, actually, I think this is hormonal and you're in that perimenopause transition. And so here we have a fun list of all of the different symptoms. And this is not a complete list. So we do have our 7 dwarfs of menopause. We have itchy, bitchy, sweaty, sleepy, bloated, forgetful, and psycho. But we also have anxiety, arthralgia, bloating, brain fog, breast tenderness, brittle nails, burning mouth, changes in body odor, decreased libido, sometimes 0 libido, depression, dental issues, difficulty concentrating, dizziness, dry eyes, fatigue. I'm tired just listening to this list. Hair loss, headaches, heart palpitations, hot flushes, insomnia, irregular menses, mood changes, night sweats, painful intercourse, polyuria, that's going to the bathroom a lot, skin itching, urinary incontinence. Anyone jump on a trampoline lately and whoopsie daisy, leaked a little bit or laughed or sneezed? UTI, vaginal dryness, weight gain. Some of these symptoms have a direct cause from rapidly fluctuating hormones or the overall decrease in hormone levels. Not everything can be linked directly to hormones so easily, but we do know that this is a list of things that do happen in perimenopause. And so then our patients are going to get advice. They take a really brave step. They go to the doctor. They tell them their symptoms. And when they do, the first thing that they are very often going to be met with is change and monitor your diet. The next thing they're going to hear is increase your movement. And then after being set up to fail, they'll maybe suggest some other interventions. And so that's where we have to step in and really know what they're being told so we know how to help support our patients with eating disorders that are going on at the same time.
Yeah. And as you all know, like our population is at such distance with their bodies. We obviously take it to heart so much that we want our clients to understand their bodies and how they work and reconnect, but we're often seeing people come through our doors with just kind of no awareness in that, being told this list of three. Dietitians, I know you're often on the front line getting people coming in distress about a lot of the body changes or hearing, the food stuff that they've come across. So we want to really think through as we consider what are the recommendations, what is the actual science, what is not, and how do we help this population that can have, such a huge amount of dichotomous thinking, really thinking what's the good, what's the bad, what's the right, what's the wrong, how do I fix this? Always needing to fix this, right? Change is really hard. This is a population that really struggles with changes and changes that don't feel as if they can be controlled, but we're being offered a lot of ways to feel as if we can really control this. And as Chrissy was saying, gosh, those statistics on how many people seek a diagnosis or care or just confirmation that what they're feeling is this, is that they're in perimenopause, for example, that repeated invalidation makes me think of what we see with our clients so often, of the idea of, not feeling sick enough, not feeling worthy of care, not feeling worthy of intervention or taking space from someone else that needs it. How often do we hear that? So this population, very thirsty for external directives on how to maintain their health, how to improve their health. We're going to ask them to kind of come back inside, ally with their body, and learn how to navigate this stuff amidst a whole sea of info out there. So we want to present the recommendations as they are, and talk about how we're going to reduce the harm, reduce the impact, and help to protect this population that really, our bodies really are going through very significant changes. It is real that some of these changes do put some health factors more at risk. And we're often dealing with a population that is having a lot of health anxiety going on. One of the things Chrissy kind of said in the beginning was, gosh, in this phase, we're often, in a sandwich generation, caring for elders, watching the decline of loved ones. And boy, is it scary to watch those changes sometimes happen. It kind of further takes us into this kind of wanting that power grab of how do I control everything that's happening now. So let's start with the food stuff. My gosh, protein. I I will say, whenever Christy and I talk, like, we're so much loving this focus that's happening culturally around perimenopause and women's health and the platform. It's amazing. And I think if we were to just like survey people randomly, they would tell us all the things they've heard about protein in this phase. We were thinking of actually just like chugging protein shakes while we talk to you guys, because right, like TikTok, we got to get those in. But here's the reality. Yes, protein is incredibly important. throughout the entire life cycle, and very much in the one that we're speaking on today. The data around protein really is that it has to be combined with weight-bearing, strength-building exercise to promote muscle growth and reduce our rates of sarcopenia and bone loss. Sarcopenia is when our body is losing muscle mass and gaining fat mass. And that is one of the things that happens, when that beautiful chart that Chrissy was showing us is happening, when those hormone levels are changing. This is real. Sarcopenia is a very real part of perimenopause. We can slow down the rates of it by increasing or making sure that we're getting enough protein in the day, and coupling that with weight-bearing exercise. Not one or the other are showing to be effective in that realm. It's really a combination. And our clients are certainly hearing this, or they're hearing, bits and pieces. The protein recommendations, however, when we look at them, they're often being promoted as a way to control weight a lot of the time. And certainly, like what I said with sarcopenia, lowering muscle mass, raising fat mass. Yeah, that sounds like what I know a lot of my clients are very, very scared of happening at all life phases. And now they're hearing, gosh, this is like a real thing. So of course there's a doubling down on that protein. The other thing that protein really does is, it gets touted as a means of appetite control. Protein can be incredibly filling. And so we're here left navigating these messages around weight control with the messaging of, we actually want to just be preserving our muscle mass and helping our bones, reducing bone loss, so that we can actually have strong bodies as we go into these next phases of life. So let's talk about the actual recommendation. So first little reminder, an RDA, a recommended daily allowance, that's the minimum amount needed to prevent a deficiency. So when we look at RDAs, we're talking minimums. Across the board, still the recommendation is 0.8 grams per kilogram. That remains even in this phase of life, because the studies are supporting an increase really to 1 to 1.6 grams per kilogram. But the studies are really mixed, and there is not like a separate RDA for this age group. So just keeping that in mind. On social media, however, the standard recommendation is 2 grams per kilogram. Fine. Protein's great, but it is really filling. So we want to just watch how our clients are going about that, because it can have such a huge impact on appetite. Fun fact though, we can only absorb about 30 grams at a time. So within like a kind of digestion window of several hours. Now, when I see the people talking about the 2 grams of protein and often selling very proprietary blends of protein powders and shakes and whatever, they will talk about drinking that protein shake over the course of 3 to 4 hours. So yeah, if they've made 100-gram a protein shake, that's you need to divide it up. But it makes my eating disorder dietitian brain go, gosh, well, what happened to like morning snack? What are we doing? How are we getting enough in? So just something to be very aware of in advising our clients. Yes, an increase in protein coupled with some strength bearing exercise. Yeah, that's been shown to be a helpful thing at this life phase. But how do we actually get it in amidst any other sort of recovery goals that are going on? So yeah, so just thinking of that in meal planning is something I really want to point out there, but let's see, we can go to the next one here. Okay, so the other one, if we're going to talk about protein, we are still fighting the fight to help people just accept the reality that carbs are such an absolutely needed part of life. Brain still needs fuel. If you still have that list of symptoms, so much of it has to do with brain fog, forgetfulness, forgetting words. I mean, I'm doing it all the time, trying to think of names of things. I can't.
Yeah,
It comes later. It feels really weird. So hopefully I'll get my words straight here. But still, we have some of these factors coming in where we have a population often coming to our door, hearing about the protein and also hearing the kind of the same thing they've heard about carbohydrates, but doubling down on the restrictive recommendations around carbohydrates, when in reality, this brain is needing all the help. It needs all the nutrients. Like, let's help it through these hormonal shifts. It's still very, very much needing its fuel. So let's look at the carbohydrates. So no, we do not want to be reducing carbohydrates in perimenopause. But if we think about why a reduction in carbohydrates is often being put out to us just in general and diet culture in our world, the air that we breathe, it's to address, belly fat, and things of that nature, to watch, insulin and kind of safeguard against insulin rises, which we do want to pay attention to in perimenopause. But when we look at what's out there on this carbohydrate reduction and the reasons behind it, it so much goes back to weight control, which of course is what a lot of our clients are coming in so fixated on, because body changes really are happening at this time. So why this focus on carbohydrates at this point? So another thing that's going to happen when we're going through these changes and our estrogen is declining is that our triglycerides and our cholesterol levels can start to come up. And this can be in a person who has never, ever had elevated triglycerides or cholesterol. Gosh, that can feel really scary. Like I said, we're often also caretaking elders who might be at like the more in stages of, paying attention to cardiovascular health and so forth. But when we kind of think about what is the messaging in diet culture around carbohydrates, it's, be careful refined carbohydrates or white foods or bad carbs or whatever terminology is getting used, because there is a belief that that can add to an increase in triglyceride levels, and have rising insulin levels. So first of all, why would triglycerides and insulin even be rising at this time? Well, as estrogen's going down, it makes our insulin sensitivity. So our ability to kind of move the glucose or the sugar out of our bloodstream into the cells, that's what insulin's going to do for us. Our sensitivity to be able to do that goes down. And also our production of insulin for many people, not all, but many, also goes down. So we're less able to kind of clear it out in the way that we used to. We're also going through a process of lipogenesis and gluconeogenesis. So this is just fancy words for our body finds ways to make more glucose for those cells if it's not getting, delivered in that way. And it can make it from other things like amino acids and lactate and glycerol. It'll kind of scavenge. And this is all in an effort to help keep our glucose levels stable, because that's our primary energy source. It's what our brain runs on. It also can do this lipogenesis or creation or synthesis of fats. So it can take excess carbohydrates, proteins, other substances, convert them to fatty acids, and assemble them into triglycerides, which our body's needing that storage form for energy. This is all a really these are smart pathways for our body to really keep us with a constant supply of things it needs. But it can result, along with other factors, in accumulation of more triglycerides. It can also lead us to a place where we're having higher levels of LDL cholesterol. So that's those kinds of cholesterol that might be thought of as kind of the quote unquote bad cholesterol and so forth. So I'll get into that more on the next slide with fats, but basically this message coming through around carbohydrates of, better watch them, better only have the really high fiber ones, because these could be raising insulin levels. These could be increasing triglyceride levels. So kind of the same narrative that we're probably hearing a lot of our clients talking about through the lifespan when they're thinking about carbohydrates. So fiber I do have down here on this one, because recommendations for the range of fiber each day remains the same, 25 to 35 grams rather. To promoting digestion, keeping things flowing with smooth muscles, doing its thing. Supporting a healthy gut microbiome and helping to stabilize those blood sugar levels. I do want to point out though, I don't know if people are hearing a lot of talk about CGMs or continuous glucose monitors. We're hearing a lot of that out there where the message being around carbohydrates, gosh, if you're going to eat them, all right, cool, we get that you need some, but, right, there's always this but, let's make sure we're not getting like an ounce more than we need, and let's make sure that we know how they're functioning in our body. So there's been a real uptick in the use of continuous glucose monitors for non-diabetics, just to get some insight, I guess, on what insulin is doing. I think I'm speaking to the choir here of how problematic that could get with our population of getting really focused and fixated on rise and fall of insulin follow eating. And I just want to reinforce here, insulin rising after we eat is normal. It is what our body does. It has to happen. It needs to happen. And then our body goes to work and it helps to clear it out and get it into the cells. And we always, we always need some glucose in the bloodstream. So if your clients are coming with that, just another kind of tool I think of really external control going on here. And we want to bring them back in, but we're keeping carbohydrates in the diet. All right, cool. You can go on to the next one. Okay, so with these fats, okay, so let's talk a little bit more about those. So one thing with estrogen is it does have really heart protective qualities. In perimenopause, as estrogen levels are declining, like I kind of said before, this can lead to an increase in those LDLs, that type of cholesterol that can kind of build up in the system. As LDL is reducing, its clearance from the bloodstream, and also the liver is producing a bit more LDL potentially in many people during this life phase. It's also believed that estrogen might stimulate the production of HDL. HDL, I hate to use good and bad, but I think it's so much what it's touted as, of that good cholesterol. So when estrogen goes down in our bodies, then so would the production of HDL. That's being researched a lot further, but that seems to be a link there. So, so we might have higher LDL, lower HDL. Cholesterol, which is that like waxy fat-like substance in our body, we use it to build cells. It travels through our blood and it's carried by particles called lipoproteins. Those are your HDL and your LDL. So we've got those kind of changing in proportion potentially, but we also have triglycerides, which is another type of fat in our blood. So our body can store extra nutrition or extra calories. This could be from carbs, proteins, whatever. It can store them as triglycerides for energy. And this is one of the big things that we see with the recommendations around types of fats and amounts of fats, and this focus on fats and carbohydrates that happens in perimenopause is about controlling these triglyceride levels. This is where we hear a lot of talk about processed foods, packaged foods, because of the types of fats, because of the type of carbohydrates in them. Just looking at that link where in perimenopause, triglycerides might just really naturally in the body be going up outside of whatever a person is choosing to eat. Again, a method of trying to amplify control over that coming in. So this can obviously make it really, really hard to keep those diets really broad and expanded and inclusive of fun foods, enjoyable foods, all of this kind of thing. So we're certainly not going to advise people to cut down their intake. We're just going to actually pay attention to how we're bringing in foods and pairing things and so forth. So there is a lot of promotion of diets that are rich in unsaturated fats, those sort of, kind of qualifying as heart healthy fats, which, yeah,
olive oil,
having this olive oil, my happy little olives. We definitely want to have these in the diet for sure, but that doesn't mean we're going to run the other way with things that have saturated fats and cholesterol. We're going to talk to our clients about incorporating, fiber and color and mindfulness and all of that around there. But this is a really real thing, because I know in so much of our work with eating disorders, it's very much putting on that gentle nutrition cap and going, all right, so my person has high cholesterol. Well, maybe they also have anorexia nervosa and they've been really, really restrictive of their fat intake. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to feed them all the foods, and probably cholesterol is going to resolve once the body has a more broad array and sufficient fat intake. It's probably going to kind of downregulate production of that cholesterol. We're going to be good. And then I can help them just, keep expanding. We're in sort of that here, but we're in a little bit of a spot of, the body really is potentially having these higher levels that isn't going to then resolve. I can table this a little bit, but really I need to help my person add in some great nutrition that's going to help kind of moderate everything and be cardioprotective for them. So it's really about kind of mitigating risk there and keeping the diet broad. All right. So with that, with our inclusive addition style of nutrition, instead of reducing and taking away, we're making sure we're adding in and talking up, antioxidants, reducing oxidative stress from declining estrogen levels. Estrogen does so much to help our bodies out. These changes are pretty real. So phytonutrients, which is our plant nutrients, if you practice from like a plate by plate method or something like that, this is your color component, really helping people to find ways to get those into the diet, again, without hyper focus on them. Also iron. So many of those cycles that are all over the place, some of them can get really heavy and go on for long amounts of time. And so we can actually see some really acute iron deficiency happening in this phase. So we want to be sure that we're helping our people get a really nice spread of iron-rich foods in their diet, just kind of across the board. Iron is going to help in the production of red blood cells, but particularly if they're saying, gosh, these cycles are like nothing I've ever experienced, they can get really light and really heavy. And so we want to address that. Chrissy's going to take us in a deep dive on bones, which is very exciting to me. But we want to protect those bones with calcium and prevent, of course, osteoporosis. So one thing to know in this phase is during perimenopause and menopause, we can lose 20% of bone mass. That is really, really significant. So much in this world of eating disorders, I feel like we're talking up building this healthy skeleton and trying to hope that our clients are going to really care about that bone matrix that's going to get laid down to what, about 25, and we can get calcium in that way. So sometimes with this population, they might really be used to really low calcium intakes. Unfortunately, women tend to be kind of low on calcium intakes. So needing a lot of support in that. So we're looking at really helping them to get a good 4 servings-ish a day, up from 3, through calcium, just to make sure that they're able to help give those building blocks to keep replenishing, every single day. So obviously there's lots of alternatives to just drinking a glass of milk that can go that way. But again, we want to be adding in our calcium-rich sources. With vitamin D, we need vitamin D to absorb our calcium. So we are looking for that. It's also really helpful in immunity, and many, many women are found to be deficient. So, so many of our clients in this age group are coming in on pretty high dose vitamin D supplementation throughout the week. So we want to support them in that and getting that vitamin D rich food. So often it's going to be your fortified dairy coming in.
And if somebody has been on vitamin D supplementation for a long time and it seems like their vitamin D level still just is not going up, always consult with your provider, but it could be a lack of vitamin K. So there is a need sometimes for vitamin K to help absorb and convert that vitamin D, make it usable. And so if you have a low vitamin D level, despite taking lots of supplementation, you might think about throwing in some K in there also. And they actually make those supplements combined now.
Beautiful. And our dark leafy greens, rich in potassium and calcium, are going to be our really, really rich K sources. So we love all that color happening in there. But potassium is a really big one too, because another thing that can happen in this phase with the decline in estrogen is some rising blood pressure levels. So one of those just nice interventions is to help our clients get in potassium-rich foods. Let's get some, bananas are kind of our classic, and fruits and vegetables to help mitigate that. Helps with insulin sensitivity, and helps with, if we're in a place in that wonky cycle where maybe we're having a lot of fluid retention, that can also be really helpful there. But the big one I think we have to just double down promoting is enjoyable foods, and talking through our people with just the value of connection and sharing and really being like in that family or friends or whatever. Some of those symptoms that come up in this phase are really increasing levels of depression and isolation and loss of identity and loss of a sense of self. And we just think of how intertwined food is with all of our spaces, and all of our connection, and obviously how that can make recovering from an eating disorder so challenging, and so rewarding, and can really help with just that connective quality that food can give us. So if we have our clients really focusing on decreasing their saturated fat and sugar intake, and increasing their salmon and leafy greens, is that going to allow them to bake the brownies with their kid that's home from school or whatever? Maybe not. So we really want to help them balance out. Yes, please keep those foods in. Obviously for recovery, but just for connection and having family favorites. Again, talked about that kind of in between space that so many in this life phase are in, or maybe making a family recipe of someone that you're watching age in front of you would be just the most connected thing, and to pass that to the next generation, never wanting dietary recommendations to get in the way of that. We want to reconnect them to all of the beauty and connection that can bring. And then we want to move our bodies. So the other thing, along with protein, that I think if we surveyed, that people would be talking about, are the movement needs. And I don't know how many people are like seeing everyone walking around in their weighted vests in their neighborhood, carrying weights again, ankle weights, whatever the thing may be. It's real big. So yes, strength training and weight bearing are really big components of helping with that reduction in sarcopenia and that bone health. So that's real, and we have this people in front of us that might have had incredibly, incredibly conflicted journeys with movement. And so we're always, across the board, diet, exercise, all the stuff, we're going to prioritize recovery and mental health very much. That's going to be the big priority here. And we do have people coming in with a real desire to understand more about what these recommendations are. So these are the recommendations that are out there based in science. I don't know how a person would actually fit all of this into their life. So just want to put that out there, because often we're still, managing families and working and trying to find time to relax and whatever. But yeah, so strength training and weight bearing, like 45 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week. That's pretty significant. And the rationale is slowing the rate of muscle and bone loss, reducing the risk of injury. We don't want to have falls or anything like that as we move into later years. Cardio, 30 minutes, 5 times a week. Studies showing this being important for heart and brain health. Like I said, that cardiac event risk increases. Well, we do know that this is one of those protective things that can be done. But then we got to do mindfulness meditation, right? For stress reduction. Lots of data out there on that being helpful. And stretching, we pull and tear muscles and stuff like that. And then as Chrissy said, the jumping in the weighted vest seems to be the newest kind of thing. But if we even look at this, just this list that I have written here, this is a really significant amount of time and devotion for a person to do. And I'd say that this is kind of on the low end of what's being touted out there as far as those movement recommendations. So we want to take a lot of that with a grain of salt. I know looking at any one of these looks actually like more exercise than I'd be prescribing to a lot of my people recovering from an eating disorder. So I just want everyone to be able to kind of speak to what they're seeing. But a big piece of this is acknowledging also that with those dietary recommendations, those are a lot of filling foods that are also really being promoted. So can a person actually get in enough to support the movement? We want to be sure, of course, that people are not in a deficit going into this. So we want to always be assessing, like, will exercise for them be detrimental to their health and their recovery and their well-being, or will it be beneficial? Are there ways that they can engage in movement where it's not compulsive, not obsessive, and is maybe connecting? Maybe there is like some peers that they can walk with and find connection through that. That can be really helpful. And really thinking of how we're framing this, right? Like framing movement as with my body, not for my body, not to change my body, but just I'm doing this to be in my body and connect with my body and help my body take on the challenges that it's going through, the challenges to come. Detaching movement from weight control, of course, continues to be imperative, and focusing on consistency, longevity, not these spurts of action. We want to have fun, be connected, laugh. Also, considering if we're talking movement with our people, what can we do that has a boundary, that has maybe a start and an end, that can get, not into a rigid routine, but get changed up and flexible and still feel spontaneous. And really framing it from an appreciation of what the body can do, not focusing on a change in the body, of course.
And so then when we're talking about menopause and perimenopause, there are, in addition to dietary and movement recommendations, and we're going to get into more specifics of if this, then that, there are also other interventions that will often come into play. One of those big ones being hormone replacement therapy. So hormone replacement therapy comes in lots of different forms and can help with many of the symptoms of perimenopause, generally by evening out those hormone levels. So the ones that are going like this, all of a sudden are going to be a little bit more like this instead of the wild fluctuations. And when we're talking about hormone replacement therapy, generally we are talking about estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. If someone is taking hormone replacement therapy and is utilizing estrogen and they have a uterus, they will also be prescribed progesterone because progesterone or estrogen that is uninhibited does increase the risk for uterine cancer. If you take it along with progesterone, that risk is completely mitigated. About 20 plus years ago, probably 25, 30 years ago, hormone replacement therapy during perimenopause and menopause was widely used. And then a study came out from the Women's Health Initiative that shut down pretty much all hormone replacement therapy because of wild misinformation. So when someone is just someone with breasts and a uterus, they have about, well, I'll just give you the kind of the numbers. 5 out of 1, about 1,000, or sorry, at baseline, about 4 out of 1,000 women will develop breast cancer without the use of hormone therapy. So that is just a normal, natural statistic, and that is what would happen. So this Women's Health Initiative was looking at the overall health of women as they age, and there was a branch of this study that was looking at hormone replacement therapy in women. And one day they came out and they shut down the entire study because they said that there is a 25% increased risk in breast cancer. But what you have to know is that that was not an accurate portrayal of what's going on, because those 4 out of 1,000 women that got breast cancer became 5 out of 1,000 women. So they took that number and they said it went from 4 to 5 and said there is a 25% increased risk, when the reality is it increased so insignificantly that it actually is not considered an increased risk. It is within the realm of normal distribution and normal of what could happen. That now it's actually being incorporated again, I think, because all of the women who were in medical school and residency at the time who stopped prescribing it were all in their mid-20s. And now they are all going through perimenopause and menopause and are like, hang on a second, this is horrible. Let's take a look again at what happened. Oh, there's all this misinformation. Hormone therapy actually is really, really safe unless there are certain true contraindications to it, like a hormone-driven breast cancer history. Other than that, with very few exceptions, it is very safe for people. So estrogen is something that can be prescribed to you together with progesterone. Estrogen can help with hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, sleep problems, mood swings, joint pain, itchy skin, bone loss. Is this list sounding familiar to those symptoms of what happens in perimenopause and menopause? Progesterone can also help with hot flashes, night sweats, heavy bleeding, sleep disturbances, headaches, bone formation, can have cardiovascular protective effects. And this is my favorite. If you take oral progesterone, when it passes through the liver, it has a hypnotic effect. So it acts almost like a sleeping pill. So if you take it right before you go to bed, you will have a fabulous night's sleep. Testosterone is also a new one that is being prescribed to individuals going through this perimenopause and menopause transition. Testosterone, often thought of as a male hormone, is actually just a human hormone. And testosterone levels in women tend to decrease significantly during that menopause transition as well. And so testosterone, though not FDA approved for a lot of different things, is actually being very widely studied right now and is shown to help significantly with low sex drive, muscle and bone weakness, fatigue, moodiness, depression, and one of the big ones now is brain fog. So testosterone levels are showing, or when someone is supplementing with testosterone, it's being found to significantly help with the brain fog. Other things that are often prescribed as well are things like SSRIs and other antidepressants. It can be helpful not only with mood, but also for someone who does have a contraindication to using hormone therapy, can be actually very helpful with hot flashes. One of the things to be aware of in our population is that Wellbutrin is often prescribed to individuals in perimenopause as a treatment for weight loss, and is often given in conjunction with naltrexone. And they actually have a combination medication now. I can't remember the name of it, but that Wellbutrin naltrexone combo is being given as a weight loss promoter. And so we need to understand, if our patients are coming into us taking these, why was it prescribed to them? And is this the best option for them right now if they're in the midst of trying to recover from an eating disorder? Gabapentin is another one that's often prescribed specifically for hot flashes, especially if you're not a candidate for hormone therapy. And if you typically experience those hot flashes as night sweats, it can just be taken at bedtime, but it can also be used during the day as well. My favorite, I kind of joke about this one, is CBT. I love CBT. I think it is incredible. I think that it is so helpful. And I don't know that it would be a first line recommendation for hot flashes, which it was for many, many years. And in parentheses, along with wearing layers. And it is considered the first line treatment for hot flashes because it can help to reduce the perceived severity of a hot flash, which, you know, when sweat is steaming off of your head and every part of your body, I think it's really real. And, you know, again, I think that I love CBT and I promote it left and right. And for hot flashes may not be my top recommendation. And then we have smoking cessation and reducing alcohol intake also as recommendations. So we've gone through a tremendous amount of information, and now we're going to very quickly, so that we have time for questions, also put it all together to say, well, what does this mean in practice, and what are we going to do about all of this? So there are very real cardiovascular risks associated with perimenopause and menopause. So the risk for cardiovascular disease does increase with age. And we know that the decrease in estrogen production results in what they call endothelial dysfunction. So the elasticity of our blood vessels changes. It's not as that lining doesn't function properly anymore. We have increased risk for high blood pressure, for plaque accumulation, and we also see the increased risk of high cholesterol. And so with this, there are going to be, again, the dietary recommendations that Mary has already talked about, the movement recommendations that we've talked about, and then there's also hormone replacement therapy. So when we talk about those nutrition recommendations, they're going to say, like we hear all the time, reduce carbohydrate intake, decrease fat intake, increase fiber intake. And for a lot of women, these are very real concerns for them. They may have parents who have high blood pressure, who have history of stroke, who have history of heart attack, who have heart disease on both sides of their family, and they want to protect themselves. One of the things that we are always doing, though, when we are talking about eating disorders is we are triaging and we are saying, well, what's going to kill you first? And very often the eating disorder will have bigger ramifications than taking a statin will. And so sometimes for certain populations, those dietary and movement recommendations may come later, and we may say, let's start with a medication. Let's start with some hormone replacement therapy. Because if hormone replacement therapy is started during or soon after someone is in menopause, it has a huge, huge protective factor against cardiovascular disease. If it is started more than 10 years after someone's last menstrual period, it has the opposite effect. So it is something that has to be started early as opposed to later on in that menopause transition. But maybe that is a first line for some patients. Mary, anything to add in there?
No, I think it's, so often our population wants to just go the natural route only and just really dive into diet and exercise. And I think it's having those conversations that I think we're all really well versed in, of just opening up options to people and taking away stigma from sometimes needing a different form of an intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so then we have to look at the bones. And so quick lesson on bones. We are always making bones. Our bones are constantly replacing themselves, and we want our bones to be big and thick and strong. And so when we are young, we are depositing a lot of bone. We are depositing more than we are recalling. So our bones are getting bigger, thicker, and stronger. Once we reach an age of somewhere between 25 and 30 years old, we reach a state of equality where we are depositing and recalling bone in equal amounts. Our bones are their biggest, thickest, and strongest. Most individuals, once they get into that perimenopause and menopause transition, will start to recall more bone than they are depositing, and that is very estrogen driven. But our fun fact, because I always like fun facts, every 10 years you have a completely new skeleton. So I am 44 and I am actively making my 5th skeleton, and I want that skeleton to be really, really strong. And so I want to make sure that I'm doing everything that I can to promote the strength of my bones, because I don't want to end up in the hospital with a hip fracture. We know that osteoporosis increases the risk for spontaneous fracture. I mean, I always give this example of when I worked in a hospital and I was on an orthopedics floor. I'd have my little old ladies that would come in with a hip fracture, and I would ask them, did you fall and break your hip, or did your hip break and then you fell? And 90% of the time they were like, you're right. I was just standing there. And then all of a sudden I wasn't. Their hip broke and then they fell because they had osteoporosis and their bones simply could not hold them up anymore. And I don't want that happening. And so I want to make sure that I am optimizing estrogen as much as I can, because estrogen plays an effect on osteoblasts, which blast bone into our body. It decreases the activity of an osteoclast, which removes bone from our body, so that we can have those big, thick, strong bones. And so as estrogen decreases, those osteoclasts take over and are pulling back more bone, and those osteoblasts are not blasting as much bone. And so there are different things that we can do. And again, we're going to have dietary recommendations. We're going to have, in this case, more than anything, those those movement recommendations. And so this is where that impact activity and the weight bearing activity is really going to be promoted and pushed and pushed and pushed. The thing to understand, though, is that when someone is in a malnourished state, when someone's intake is less than their output, that same activity has a negative effect. So if I go like this with my arm, where these muscles insert into the bone puts pressure on those bones, and that is what stimulates my bones to get bigger, thicker, and stronger, which is why they're going to recommend things like heavy weight lifting. But when someone is in a negative state, that pull on this bone from these muscles is actually going to weaken the bones more. And so we have to make sure that if there are movement recommendations made to individuals with eating disorders, that those are done very cautiously, very carefully, and only once they are in a solid place of recovery. So we are not saying to this person, never move your body again. We know that they need to for their bone health, but they can't do that until it's able to be done in a way that is safe and is going to have a positive effect rather than a detrimental effect. The other thing would be to have them check with their provider about hormone replacement therapy early on. There are a lot of patients that we have coming in who are nowhere near that menopause transition, who are now coming in taking estrogen and progesterone in their 20s because of their eating disorder, and the studies coming out showing that that hormone replacement therapy with an eating disorder has that protective effect on the bones. Mary, anything else?
No, I mean, I think that just goes back to what I think so many of us know really well is that we have to get the nutrition on board, and then we can start having more of those movement conversations. You're still going to see the same things on board of like, we could go hypermetabolic for a while. We're just chugging through that nutrition. We have to have a surplus in order for our body to be able to use exercise in a protective way. I think the difference feels like we sometimes will see our women coming in presenting with this urgency because they kind of are hearing all this information, they're getting their weighted vest in the mail, they're doing all of this stuff, and there's this intense urgency to get the movement on board. Yeah, we want to get there in a healthy way when nutrition's on board. All right, so the urogenital system in this phase is also really impacted by that lowering of the estrogen in those tissues. So when we think about like, intimacy and things that can really be shame inducing and stigmatizing of like, yeah, we laughed before about maybe trying to get on a trampoline and jump. Well, that's also could be a funny story after, but it's really mortifying to pee and maybe have to leave or whatever may come with that. So this really, these really intimate changes often are happening, not across the board, but in many women going through this stage. This might be, postcoital bleeding, increased risks of urinary tract infections, really painful intercourse, needing to pee often, or, little bits just coming out. Incontinence can also be happening. And increased risk of urogenital prolapse because of the reduction in collagen elasticity in the pelvic floor. I know just yesterday I got a thing that a new office is opening up, like right down the way from me, of pelvic floor therapists. This is a big thing that's coming in because there has been this emergence of attention to needs going on at this life stage and many others. And when we think about these really kind of not often talked about changes, it can lead to so much social isolation, a loss of intimacy in relationships, lowering of self-esteem, a real projection of not feeling wanted or desired, or, all of these things that can come in, just kind of exacerbating, these narratives that our clients might already have in their heads of not being, desirable or valued or whatever that may look like. So, when we know that at the same time, we've got a lot of changes potentially happening from these hormones in our libidos and weight shifting in the body. And so often our clients are so used to, whether they're coming from a background of having an eating disorder in this realm, or they're just really noticing the changes and the moving away from the societal ideals of bodies. This can so much get internalized as, because my outward is changing, obviously I'm being, rejected, isolated, not kind of desired in the same way. If we think about even just the societal ideal kind of female figure that's promoted, it's really directly opposite to the changes that happen in the body, where there's going to be more of, gaining in the midsection and so forth, losing that sort of waist figure that's really promoted and idealized. So what often doesn't get paid attention to is that oftentimes, other people in the relationship, the partner or whatever, are maybe going through their own changes at a life stage. I bring all this up because no matter our disciplines, this is what often our women are coming in and giving us and talking about and telling us how they're feeling around it. So I'd say be ready because it's just a shift in the conversations I think that we're often used to having with others. But anything that can signal coming to an end or a closure can be really hard. Closing any sort of chapter of life or of our stature in culture is really hard, especially when we're leaving something that has been so much put on a pedestal in so many ways in our society of our fertile years. So exiting that can bring up a whole bunch of feelings. I'll say on the flip side, it can be really incredible because we're not getting into it in this presentation, but there's so much liberation and creativity and space for self and really going back to things that really drive us as individuals without all of those expectations that come in. So an incredibly beautiful phase of life that our people and maybe we are entering, but often what we're seeing in our spaces is individuals going through really, really hard, private, intimate discomforts and seeking any way that they can make it stop, that they can avoid it, that they can slow it down, particularly these body changes and changes that impact, intimacy. And sometimes there's that place of acceptance, right? Like, Chrissy, last time we were together, you said, well, I think of it this way, if you're going to pee a little bit every time you laugh, our clients are like, well, I might as well look good while I'm doing it. Like, if this is my lot in life, then how do I make myself in control of this piece that I feel like I can control? And that so much of the information out there is really telling us that we can and somehow should control. So this really goes back to, using those skills of helping our clients really, help them accept change and navigate all of that while giving them the reality of like, yep, this is a time to do the Kegels. We really want to be doing those. Prolapse is a real thing. We can help with some of these issues and doing some of these kind of everyday things that we can help to promote with them. But as Chrissy said before, like always triaging, what can we bring in? Where are you at with your ability to take this in a way that is not gonna interfere with your physical or mental well-being? So movement, we're talking through different ways of doing some resistance and some aerobic kind of based stuff. Now there was, you might speak to this study a little bit more. I think you were talking more about it last time, Chrissy, with the aerobics and resistance.
Yeah. So, when we're talking specifically about urogenital health, there was a recommendation for aerobic exercise and resistance training. But then in the study, it says the quality of the evidence was a B-. Like, this really doesn't help based on randomized controlled trials, but the strength of the recommendation was strong because there were no harmful outcomes from the studies. So clearly they are not also looking at eating disorders and disordered eating when they're doing these studies. The other one that I found rather infuriating was when you look at the nutrition recommendation, there are different things like increasing your phytoestrogens, because if estrogen is increasing, you may have more lubrication, healthy fats, things like that, probiotics to promote, vaginal wellness. And then there's the recommendation to be mindful of refined sugars and processed foods, not because of urogenital health, but because of inflammation that can lead to weight gain. So I go to my doctor to talk about the fact that it really hurts, after having intercourse, and they say, well, don't eat refined sugars because that can lead to weight gain. That's not what I came here for. So we also have to look at what those recommendations are and why they're being made. But then when we look at hormone replacement therapy, low dose vaginal estrogen is one of the biggest recommendations. It comes as a cream, it comes as a pill, it comes as a ring. It's very low dose, it's not systemic. But then you can also do like a systemic estrogen to help with all of the symptoms, but also for vaginal health. And I know we only have like 8 minutes left, so we have to.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
On it. Yeah.
Go for it. Oh, I forgot to put the slide. Okay.
All right. So we basically, in summary, we generally have two groups of people coming to our spaces. The people who have never heard about any of this, and we can introduce them to kind of what's going on in the body and the recommended, sound changes. And then we've got people that have heard, usually by the internet, lots of different things. Maybe they've really doubled down and they have, supplements and weighted vests galore. And we want to pull them back a little bit from maybe some of the influx of information they've heard and help to just clear them up for it. So our job is to put the person who feels really a distance with their bodies back feeling in more connection with their bodies, or maybe sometimes some of them for the first time is really, building that connection with their body. Helping them refocus away from this, dichotomous thinking of they've got to be doing exactly this, exactly that, right, wrong, and helping them to find that place where they're going to be able to navigate these changes and these recommendations amidst their bigger life, and not adding more stress to their situation, and helping them to understand that, yeah, parts of this, there might be some little bits that can be kind of controlled, so to speak, or improved and changed, but very much of this is just part of the body's blueprints of what happens in this phase, that we need to just kind of work through and see what we can support. Yeah.
Mhm. All right. So just kind of to finish up, our clients are coming to us with these real body changes that are happening, with real changes in their cardiovascular system, in their bone health. They're coming to us with very real emotional challenges in their lives, and very often in a society that's telling them to just deal with it. This is part of aging. You'll be fine if you just try hard enough. They're also dealing with tremendous amounts of grief and loss. 7 out of 10 women divorce in this age range. They're losing their youthfulness. They may feel like their appearance is changing, hence why there are so many, Botox places available for all of us, the rejuvenation spas. They're seeing their health and maybe their parents' health declining, and that is taking a real toll on them. And so we want to make sure that they're able to come to us and feel like they have a safe space where we can help them to parse out how to navigate this when tons of stuff is being thrown at them by the internet, by people who don't know eating disorders. And so we have to come in and help to really bridge that gap. And so, Mary, we can remember that.
Absolutely.
Change is
Gosh,
hard.
yeah, change is hard. Change is really hard. And this is really real change in every area of life and body that are going on. So we want to lead with balance, right? And we want to lead with helping our people to understand that this is just pre-programmed, and yeah, like, I'm going to sound cliche, but what a gift to be able to enter this phase of life, and what an incredible thing to get to look, with the knowledge and the research that is out there thus far, to help women go into their later years in such a healthier space than the generations before us have ever been able to do. Like, we just understand so much more now, and that just feels like such an incredible gift. And in that, acknowledging how much is changing, yeah, like, the way that we're perceived is changing, the way that we might feel, all of these things are really changing, and so much holding space for the joy, the grief, the loss, and the beauty of all of it. We want to just actively continue to fact check and reframe in doing that, because with this beautiful emergence of perimenopause and menopause information out there, it also means that there's like a million influencers and people guiding things. So I think, the road is really paved for needing a ton of support and reframing. Always in nutrition, I'm going to say we want to add, we never want to take away unless you're allergic or it's harmful to you in some way. But we're balancing, we're looking at it with a gentle nutrition approach, and always remembering that food is such a connector throughout life and with others. We want to avoid specific numbers. I think I didn't say it before, but gosh, those protein recommendations make me go nuts, because it's got women wanting to weigh themselves and calculate their protein, and maybe they're not ready for that or whatever. A lot of this leads to like numbers fixation, which we want to just keep dispelling. Acknowledging life stressors and all the rest. Anything else, Chrissy? There's 2 more minutes.
No, I think we go and see if there's any questions. So, Jamie, I don't know if there's oh, I saw you come on for a second.
Sorry about that. Yes, there is actually a question in the chat, and this is from Elizabeth. She said, I'm curious if you have seen any benefit/protection with the weight gain, especially in the stomach area in the menopausal period.
Well, I've always heard, right, that it's our life raft, not our spare tire, right? Is what Oh my gosh. See, my perimenopause brain is blanking, but one of my absolute heroes who said that, whose book is on my shelf over there. So I want to give credit if anyone can think of it. Oh my God, I'm Mart. Anyway, I'm blanking. But yes. So my understanding has always been that it's coming there to help replace, like the fat stores are coming there as the estrogen in the body is decreasing to kind of take over that realm. That's my understanding of it from my end. But I love the life preserver as opposed to a spare tire reframe. I think I have that hanging actually in my closet right now, but I can't think of. Oh my gosh, it's gonna make
Do
me
you
cry.
want to go look at your shelf,
Yes,
Mary?
I do. I do.
Okay, go ahead. Yes, go look at the shelf. Also, just want to say to the both of you, this has been an amazing presentation. Lots of information. You're getting so much love in the chat. People are feeling seen. People are feeling heard. One of the favorite slides was the seven dwarfs. That is it. That's a fan fave. So we love that. Just lots of love. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining while Mary is looking for the author of that book. I just want to remind you that at the conclusion of this presentation, we will have a
Yes,
brief moment.
Margot.
Oh, here we
Right.
go.
Margot Main. Love. Great book. Wonderful. Yes. Thank you.
There you go. There is a question. Will this be recorded? Yes, this session will be recorded, so you will be able to go back and rewatch this in your CEGO dashboard. And like I was saying, you will have a brief, well, not a brief, but you'll have a break, and then we will reconvene and we will hear from Mariah, who will be talking about MCAS at 1:30. So we will see you all back here at 1:30 for our second CE session of the day. Thank you so much, Mary and Chrissy. This has been amazing.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye, everyone.